I want architecture to communicate what indigenous knowledge is. And in indigenous knowledge, we can hold truths and facts that are related to stories and visions and animals, things that the Western world think are sort of mysterious or are kinds of mythology. All of those things are ways that I think architecture can engage our bodies and our instincts. They're tacit parts of our knowledge. And that's how indigenous knowledge has always worked and how indigeneity has always worked. Indigenous culture isn't just symbols and icons. And we can't just rely on those things to communicate what the culture is. And so for me, if I can put things into the world that people sort of respond to, that's what's important. I am Chris Cornelius. I'm a citizen of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. I am professor and chair of architecture at the University of New Mexico and principal and founder of Studio Indigenous. So OOK-wee-tah-ZAY was originally designed for the Chicago Architecture Biennial, and it means stranger.
When Chris was approached by the Chicago Architectural Biennial to create a piece that responded to the idea of a written or verbal land acknowledgement and turning that into a physical creation, he recognized that he's from Wisconsin, he spent time in Virginia, and now he lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He realized that he was not from Chicago, and it's not the ancestral homelands of the Oneida people.
And so what I wanted to do was to do a kind of anti-land acknowledgement, meaning just because I'm indigenous, I can't speak for every indigenous person. I am a stranger in those places too, that I'm a visitor there as well. And so what I wanted to do was to begin to think about that. And then kind of taking that term sort of literally in a way that the thing is strange in itself.
Cornelius's design process is very unique in that he infuses his heritage into the process. So for this piece, it's actually broken down into 3 separate sections. The white section is titled carapace, which is shell. That's very important in broadly Native American history, but also for the Oneida. In their origin story, there's a lot of reference to the tortoise shell. The second area is the gray part, which he titles the tail. And here we can see there are an array of jingles applied to the surface. These are actually applied in the pattern of constellations and star patterns. Wherever there's one jingle, that would be more of a dim star, and then where we see 2 and 3 groupings and larger groupings, that's where it would be a brighter star. Around 1900, the Native Americans began keeping the tin lids off of cans and rolling them into the shape to create these jingles. What they then would do is attach them to different ceremonial dresses, and when the women would dance, they would jingle together and create a very specific sound.
And then the main component, once you're inside the piece, is what I call the sky chimney. In indigenous architecture, I think it's always important to have a view to the sky. And that is for many reasons. One is to begin to understand where you are in the world and what time of day it is, what time of year it is. But in this case, what I did was there's a video projection of the sky.
So in the center of the structure's ceiling, we have what's called a sky hole. Traditionally, in indigenous architecture, this would also could be known as the smoke hole, where it would be ventilation for the fire, but also in ceremonial or spiritual buildings, it would be a sky hole where it's just an opening to the sky, where inhabitants of the structure, either for ceremonial purposes or spiritual reasons, could connect the skies with humans on Earth. And what Cornelius has done here is he's filmed nighttime and daytime footage of the sky above his new home in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And it's his nod to connecting his new place of home with the structure.
I will say that For me, I'm not trying to make something that equals something, meaning like this thing is this and that's the end. I want people to begin to understand that these things exist in the world and you can decide what they mean to you. So in my work, I think about like what you're sitting on and how you're touching it, or do you want to touch the building? Oftentimes we don't, unless it's something interesting. It's engaging all of these senses. And so in that way, I want it to begin for the individual to have some experience. And so for me, if I can put things into the world that people sort of respond to in that way, that's what's important. But the other thing is that as a designer and architect, forget about the indigenous part. I just want to make beautiful things. Also, that the values that I'm trying to embed in these things are timeless. They're part of our culture and how we understand the land and how we understand how we conduct ourselves as humans. All of that is part of how we begin to think. And so I think of architecture as the future artifacts of our culture. Am I making good artifacts? Am I being a good future ancestor? And in my work, I'm trying to connect all of those things.
Thanks for watching the Arts Page. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories of art in our community.